モンキー D ルフィ、お前らを超えて海賊王になる男だ。
What's good, everyone? It's Tim, also known as mtgmeurlin, and today we're going on a journey with another one of my cEDH decks, Mugiwara Pirates, a mid-range Malcolm Kediss value pile. With this deck, our game plan is simple. We want to mulligan to turn 1 or 2 Malcolm, follow that up with a Kediss the next turn, to start generating 3 treasures per combat, and using our abundance of mana and mini card draw engines to put together a win. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's start with going through our list and seeing what cards we're playing. We run a relatively lean 18 creatures. Most of our creatures are pretty straightforward in what they're used for, but we'll be pointing out some of the more interesting includes. Of course, we've got to start with our second in command, Glinthorn Buccaneer. It's the usual 1-card win condition in red Malcolm decks, but he's often just an interaction check for our opponents. Magda is an engine for our treasure production and can put together our wins on her own if we give her enough treasures. Reckless Fireweaver and Hedron Detonator are 2 creatures that, when artifacts enter the battlefield under our control, deal damage to our opponents, and that damage can quickly add up over the course of a game. Of course, we're playing the 3 creature clones in Flesh Duplicate, Fimage, and Phyrexian Metamorph, but we're also playing a new card for the list, Teferi, Mage of Zhalfir. And finally, at our top end, we have Consecrated Sphinx and Niv-Mizzet Peru. Big splashy spells that can draw us a ton of cards if left unchecked, and these can often be dropped as early as turn 3 with mana up to protect them in most cases. We're also running a single Planeswalker in Tezzeret the Seeker to find our important artifacts like the One Ring, which we'll be going over now. We're running the average artifact package with all the normal fast mana, as well as both artifact clones, Impostor Mech and Cursed Mirror. In addition to Teferi, Mage of Zhalfir, we also run a defense grid to have a little more consistency in having protection for our win attempts, as well as Maskwood Nexus and the One Ring for commander synergies and card draw respectively. We're running 6 enchantments, Combat Research, Curiosity, Mystic Remora, Underworld Breach, Ophidian Eye, and Rhystic Study. The most interesting of these being Combat Research, allowing either our Malcolm to connect easier and draw a card, or our Kediss to not die to Bowmasters and give it a little more protection. Coming now to our instance, there's not too much you wouldn't normally see in a normal blue-red deck, but we do have a few select spells we want to point out. The first non-usual card is Alchemist Retrieval. We choose to play this over Chain of Vapor just because of how much Chain of Vapor can backfire on us when we need to go off. Artificial Evolution and Wings of Velisvel are our 2 creature hacks or creature type changers in the instant suite. We use these mostly to synergize with our commander to make more creatures make treasures for us, and they're honestly our most common win condition when paired with either Reckless Fireweaver or with Hedron Detonator. And finally, we have Word of Invention, which is simply an instant speed artifact tutor for whatever we might be needing in the moment. Our sorceries are where we have most of our utility spells, our tutors like Gamble, Rite of Flame for ramp, our wheels for card draw, and some lands that we can tutor up with Mystical Tutor, just in case. Alright, we finally made it to the fun part, winning the game. We have technically 4 different win conditions that we can generally put together over the course of a game. The first and most obvious one, Glinthorn Buccaneer. With Malcolm on the board, Glinthorn is a 1-card win condition. By going to combat and attacking with Glinthorn, if we activate his ability either before combat or if we need the mana after combat damage, in the end of combat step, we can discard a card to draw a card. This triggers Glinthorn's ability to deal 1 damage to each opponent, triggering Malcolm and generating 3 treasures. We can now sack 2 treasures and activate Glinthorn again, and this presents a loop of dealing quote-unquote infinite damage to our opponents. Now there are 2 things to keep in mind with this combo. 1, you must have a card in hand to discard to Glinthorn's ability or you won't be able to activate it at all. And 2, if one of your opponents is at a significantly higher life total than your other opponents, you may run into a situation where you'll no longer net mana in the loop. This often is not a problem as you can continue to repeat your loop until you kill your other opponents, but where it becomes a problem is if you run out of mana to continue the loop with only one opponent remaining. In this case, you'll want to sculpt your hand in such a way to protect your board or put together a different win condition post-combat. Our second win condition is the one we actually usually use to win the game, Pirate Weaver. This combo involves using Reckless Fireweaver or Hedron Detonator and turning it into a pirate with one of our 3 creature type changing effects: Artificial Evolution, Wings of Velis Vel, and Maskwood Nexus. Once Fireweaver is a pirate, we can go to combat, generate 3 treasures, or just simply cast an artifact from our hand to begin the loop. Fireweaver, or Hedron Detonator, will see the artifact enter the battlefield, and they will trigger, either dealing 1 damage to each opponent or 1 damage to a target opponent. This damage, now that they are a pirate, triggers Malcolm and makes more treasures. These 2 triggers will continue going off of each other until the table is dead. If you're using Detonator, you will have to choose your opponents each time, but the effect is still the same. Now I will admit this win condition is soft to creature removal, as well as a well-timed Stifle effect, but this is our most common win condition because it's honestly the hardest to interact with, and it doesn't rely on actually having to use the triggers, so it can win through artifact hate pieces, making this one of our most resilient win conditions. Our third win condition is cEDH Red Deck staple Underworld Breach. With access to both Breach and Brain Freeze, as well as the Lion's Eye Diamond, this is a combo that is no brainer to slot in as it's super card efficient and relatively easy to put together. Finally, our last win condition is Niv-Mizzet and Curiosity. While Niv-Mizzet is one of our best card draw engines, if we can resolve a Curiosity effect, namely Curiosity, Thayanite, or Tandem Lookout, onto Niv, we can ping down the table using his card draw trigger to ping an opponent, triggering the Curiosity effect to draw another card. This win condition has the downside of possibly not being enough to kill the table, but with our whole deck in our hand, we should be able to put together another winning board state. Alright, we've now gone through the list, so let's take a look at some sample hands and see what we're looking for. Alright, looking at our first 7, we only have 1 colored mana, and in theory we could get 2 by playing Ancient Tomb into Soul Ring into Metamorph, copying Lotus Petal, but that's very involved and for a first 7, and we know that we can do better, so let's mulligan it and try to find something that's a little more streamlined. And here it is. We're rewarded with a turn 1 Malcolm with the ability to tutor on the end step before our second turn, giving us as much flexibility as possible with as little risk as possible. Snap Keep on our second 7. Alright, looking at our second starting hand, it's got a lot of lands, but no acceleration except for Dockside. It also has protection and defense grid, but this hand depends on a good Dockside on turn 2, and otherwise we're playing a turn 3 Malcolm and a turn 4 Kediss, and that's simply not fast enough, so we're going to go ahead and mulligan. And once again, we are rewarded for mulliganing with a very good second 7. It's not as fast as our first keepable hand, but turn 2 Malcolm is still very good, and with the Jessica's Will castable off treasures the next turn, and the ability to use that mana for either a D-Rift Tutor or casting off the exiled cards, this hand also has removal and protection for whatever is happening at the table, so we'll keep it. And our final opening hand, we have a turn 1 Malcolm, but no way to really power out Kediss pre-combat on turn 2. But this hand is very strong if you're going first, as an early time twister can ruin opening game plans. Nevertheless, I know that we can do better, so we're going to go ahead and mulligan to our second 7. Our second 7 is much worse than our first, and it's for a lack of lands, so we'll just keep going down to mulligan to 6. Now this is an interesting opening hand. If we're not going first, we get a Gemstone pregame with our combo in hand twice over, so it's just a matter of finding protection for it. And honestly, I think that if you're going first, it's probably a mulligan, but if you're not going first, I think I'd keep this on a 6, getting rid of the Maskwood Nexus. After looking at these opening hands, I'm hoping that you all can see that this is a very resilient list and it pivots between its layered win conditions fairly seamlessly, allowing it to always be in the game and looking for an opening somewhere. And honestly, that's the deck. If you have any questions, please leave them either here or on the list in Moxfield that'll be down below, and I'll respond as best as I can to any questions on the list that you may have. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.